Good evening. I'm Francene Katzen, and I'm sitting in for Susie McMahon tonight on her virtual live book club. And I would like to welcome tonight Susan Zurenda. Welcome to the book club tonight, Susan.
Thank you, Francine, and thank you so much for being my host. You are a wonderful, wonderful book ambassador, and many thanks to Susie for inviting me to be on the program.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about your second book since I was so loved your first book, Bells for Eli, and you know how much I love that. And
I
even
appreciate it.
and had you in my home to host a book party, which was the highlight of 2021.
Oh, for me,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, wasn't that fun? It's hard
It
to
was
believe
so
it
much
was
fun.
2 years ago. Oh my goodness. And I'm holding up this gorgeous book because I love the color and the title as well. So before we get started, I would like to read a little bio of Susan, if I may. Susan Beckham Zurenda taught English for 33 years to college and high school students. Her debut novel, Bells for Eli, has received several awards, including first place for best first book fiction in the 2021 Independent Publisher Book Awards. Zurenda has also published and won numerous awards for her short fiction. A lifelong South Carolinian, she lives in Spartansburg. So, with further without further ado, let's get into this book and discuss it.
Sounds good. Sounds great.
And, okay, so my first question is, as probably everybody wants to know, where did the idea come from for this book, The Girl from the Red Rose Motel?
Okay. As you mentioned, I was a teacher of English for 33 years. Most of those years, I was in the community college system. But the last 10 years of my career, I went to Spartanburg High School in the town where I live, where my girls went to school. And I had a very strange sort of teaching life in that I taught the widest extremes possible. I taught 4 classes of your brightest, usually well off, certainly where education's valued in the household, classes of 12th grade AP English. And my 5th class was called Reading Strategies. And the kids in that class were there because they'd failed the exit exam and they couldn't graduate from high school. So they were there to see if they could pull up their reading scores. And I'd never taught reading in my life enough to get through that exam. And I wanted to see what would happen if I brought together 2 young people from these tremendously different places. My two of my main characters, there are 3, but 2 of them, Sterling Lovell and Hazel Smalls, are about as different as you can be in almost every imaginable way: sex, culture, race, background, maps of the world, just about in every way possible. And then the third major character is their English teacher, Angela Wilmore, who gets way involved in their lives.
She does get way involved, but you managed to keep it like really as professional, but also caring. And I never felt like she crossed the line in any way.
Right.
Was that difficult to write?
In a way, it was. I mean, she's tempted a number of times to cross the line. Of course, she has her own story arc. She's newly widowed and comes to the high school because she can make more money there than she did where she was teaching before. And she gets in, she's widowed and she gets involved with the divorced principal. And of course, that has its own struggles and its own story. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that during the novel, she ends up becoming Hazel's foster mother, and Hazel lives with her family in the dilapidated Red Rose Motel. And it would be a spoiler to say why and how Angela becomes Hazel's foster mother, but she does. And I really didn't know. I thought a lot about that and how that would be so difficult, maybe for a teacher. But I actually, that situation was inspired by a good friend of mine's daughter, who was a kindergarten teacher. She was teacher of the year in Greenville County, which is the county next to mine in South Carolina. And she had a little boy in her class who had nowhere to go. And she became Isaiah's foster mother for about a year. And I watched that process, and it made me realize just how dedicated teachers can be. There's no money involved. And by golly, I decided that Angela could do that too in the novel.
And be a caring, compassionate human being, and also be a great teacher.
Right.
Yeah. That part. And I was pretty surprised all throughout this book. And as I said, I don't want to say anything about the spoilers. The ending, I was kind of shocked about all of that in a good way. Because, you might think that you know what's going to happen, but you really don't.
Right.
So,
what I like to say is, Hazel is in miserable circumstances at the Red Rose Motel, and her desire to hide her reality from people on the outside creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of insecurity. But with her indomitable nature, along with the affluent Sterling and her very unlikely love story with him, and Angela Wilmore's empathy and understanding, with all of these things, she triumphs. She develops self-confidence, and she triumphs. And so we have this very bold, life-changing decision at the end of the novel.
Yeah, it was, kind of blew me away. But I was like, wow, that's kind of, wasn't really expecting that. So I'm curious to know how you dig deep and write about young people like that. It's almost like, how do you understand that? Do you do you go back and remember when you were young? Like, how do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. And I had a similar question just recently. I think it's a little bit of both. I think in some ways I did try to sort of take myself back to, what are our heads like when we're 18 years old, or Hazel 17, Sterling is 18. What do we think at that age? What are our bodies and our minds and our psyches doing? But also, I, taught young people, even in community college, they're still 18, 19 years old. And I think I taught young people for so long, and I had two daughters of my own, that I hear those voices in my head, and as a teacher, you may not mean to be, but you're quite the eavesdropper. I mean, I heard way more than I ever needed to hear, especially when I was teaching those last 10 years in high school, because they don't have a lot of filters, and they don't even know or remember that they are standing there talking in front of their teachers.
They don't realize that someone can actually hear them. They're in a world of their own, don't you think?
They are in a world of their own. And writers, that's what we do. We observe and we listen and we absorb.
And that you did that quite well.
Thank you.
I did cry for her, Hazel, because you made us feel like we were right there with her, but I was rooting for her the whole time.
Good.
I wanted her to rise above and be okay, but I wanted her to not be with Sterling. Like, I wanted her to, I kept thinking he was going to do something awful to her, like break her heart or something.
Well, and he is so, but Sterling, he carries some baggage of his own inside. He was the kid growing up who was the overweight kid. He had big ears, and kids made fun of him, and they bullied him and said at Halloween he didn't need a costume. And so, of course, his family's wealthy, and they sent him off to camp. Lost all the weight. When you've got money and means, all these things can happen, and has the surgery to fix his ears. And so when he becomes a teenager, of course, like all of his friends in his clique. They at least they believe that they've got the world by the tail. But we are where, we so much of us, I think, is who we were as children and how we were formed and what experiences we had. So when he meets Hazel, though, of course he's initially attracted to her because she's beautiful. I mean, she's just physically beautiful. But the more he gets to know her, I think it taps into an empathy that's inside him that he didn't maybe consciously even know he had. But he understands shame. He knows what it feels like. And so he can connect to Hazel on that level.
That is beautifully said. I think you're right about that, because when you're right, when we do grow up, whatever our circumstances are, I grew up as an overweight child. I certainly can relate to that. And I kept thinking about that with him, because that's not something you hear, that boys are overweight. It's usually
Right,
girls. And
right,
so when he was talking about it, I was like, oh, I know how he feels. And then you do develop a lot more compassion for people and understanding.
right.
I
When you
think,
when you have been in a circumstance where you've been made to feel less than for whatever
mhm,
reason, whether it's
right,
overweight or whatever reason it is, it can go a lot of different ways. It can shame you forever, or you find your way out of it, and then you're able to connect and empathize with other people
right, and then help others, and
and
then,
help others. Just be
y
kind.
yeah, and it's so easy and so simple. It's way easier than being mean.
Right,
I
right,
mean, I think, and, when she I don't know if I should say this or not, but when she lost her mother, it just broke my heart, because I thought I was really worried about what would happen to her and her
right,
sister,
right. And
you
not a,
know?
not a permanent loss, but yeah, right,
Right.
right.
Yeah,
When she is displaced from her mother.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so I just thought, "Oh my gosh,
yeah,
this child she's going up against every odd, and
yeah.
how will she
Yeah, she's
make
in,
it?"
yeah, like I said, she has a lot of miserable circumstances to endure, but she is blessed with an indomitable nature, as some of the young people whom I taught in reading strategies were. Some were not, but some were. And I just quick little story if we have time.
Sure.
I didn't have a model for Hazel in my head, not when I was writing the manuscript. Sterling, yes, he is an amalgam of 8 very arrogant, brilliant miscreant boys whom I taught one year in AP English, and they had banded together in middle school. And they had a gang mentality, and they had more or less just terrorized their teachers and even their classmates. Just, we're the ones, we overpower ever since. And they'd never been brought to task, I think, because of who they were. They were going to top tier schools. They had influential parents. And there are two circumstances in the novel that are based on my real life teaching experiences. And one of them is the opening, well, it's the second chapter, when Sterling and his cohorts take over the class. And that really happened to me with those
It
boys.
it did in your
Yes.
classroom?
Yes, they call themselves the Crazy Eights, and I call them the Hateful Eightful. And that's the epithet I use in the novel for those boys. But yes, they started one-upping everything I said. I was teaching that same play, Trifles, and they set out to make the play a trifle. And they kept one-upping until I stopped teaching. I had never done that before, and I never did it after that. But I stopped, and that day I said, "That's it. They're going to go to in-school suspension." The vice principal, wanted to send them home to out of school. I said, "Mm-mm, they'll play video games. We're sending them to in-school suspension." So Sterling, in my mind, he was actually the first character who emerged. He was an amalgam of those real life boys. But Hazel, I didn't have a model for her. I really, in the beginning, wanted to put Sterling with someone who would bring him into the more of the real world. But as Hazel kept developing, she took over, and of course she became the protagonist, and I love her. But after I turned in the manuscript to my agent, this is weeks after I turned in the manuscript, I was sitting in my den one afternoon, and all of a sudden, I remembered this young woman whom I taught in reading strategies. Her name was Rakesha, or is Rakesha. And she was, I don't know, maybe on a fourth or fifth grade reading level, but she had a very sweet and determined spirit, like Hazel does. And she passed, if barely, that exit exam. And I remembered that she had written me a thank you note. And I've probably got it here. I think I've got it in my office because I've used it at some book talks. Let's see if I can pull it out. And I might be taking too much time with this, but
No, absolutely. I think this is important
so,
to discuss this because I think,
so,
I love a good thank you note.
so this is her thank you note. She couldn't afford a store-bought card. This is a trashed piece of poster board. I'm sure she got it out of the garbage can. And let me see, the writing is very hard to see on the back. It's pencil in red ink, but let me just read it to you. And then I realized afterward, okay, I'll say it after I read this. It's real quick. To Ms. Z. Dear Ms. Z, I'm going to miss you so much. You showed me a lot this year and showed me that I can do and be anything I want if I just try and never give up on myself. When I first started in your class, I didn't like writing or reading, but now I like reading book and writing. And I hope you would never forget me, Ms. Z, and good luck with you, family, and everything. And I love you. And when I found this in my couple of boxes I saved of memorabilia, I just sat there kind of in a stupor and I thought, I wonder if Rakesha was in my subconscious all along and I didn't know it, because sometimes things work that way, because she had determination and she had spirit and she passed, if barely, that exit exam. And I watched her walk across the stage to get her diploma. And Hazel has a lot of that same kind of drive that the real life young woman did. So we just, you never know what's in your subconscious.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing
Well,
that
I
with us.
probably took too much time for that, but I just realized I had it right here in my office with me.
Well, no, I'm glad you did. I love hearing the backstories and all of that. We all love hearing that. And before I forget it, Kimberly Brock just said that she loved your book.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. That is so kind. She's such a wonderful
I
author.
know. We love her too, and we love her books. I was wondering, do you have a short passage from your book that you could read,
Yes,
share with us?
I
If at this time, if we could do that, that would be great.
I'd love to. Um, I'm going to read a little passage for Hazel. Once she gets to know Sterling, um, they are not, super an item yet at this point. She's been hiding her sheltered homelessness in the motel from Sterling. Is up to this point. And it so happens that Sterling's father, who is a well to do developer, owns this dilapidated motel. And this is a scene where Sterling, on a frigid January morning on a Saturday, goes with his father to the motel at his father's request to help unthaw frozen water pipes. And so this is where he realizes the truth about Hazel. And the book is told in 3 points of view: Sterling's, Hazel's, and their teacher, Angela Wilmore. And this is Sterling's, one of his chapters. While his father waited and Malik ran off to retrieve drop cords and hair dryers to unthaw frozen pipes, Sterling wandered off. Nothing he could do to expedite the process. He walked around the Red Rose Motel in a stiff lope, hands in his jacket pockets, wishing for gloves. The place was a relic of concrete block and metal railings built decades before. If it once evoked the idea of romance with its name, that day was long gone. He passed by the door of an open door of a room and looked inside. Orange and black geometric wallpaper from another era covered the walls. Seeing no one, he stepped inside. Someone or something had peeled the paper back to bare wall on one side of the bed. Bad trip, Sterling thought. The dark, no color carpet, alive, sucked at his feet. Towels hung on the racks in the bathroom, so he figured the room had been cleaned in spite of the wide yellow stripe ringing the tub halfway up. No one in his right mind would stay overnight in this crummy place, he thought, even as he knew people actually lived here, day after day, week after week. Sterling walked back outside, shuddered. He wandered back to the office because what was the point of freezing his ass off to watch people blow hair dryers on frozen pipes? The office might not be warm enough for comfort, but it was a hell of a lot better than outside. He would sit and wait. Approaching the door, he saw the arm of a slim figure inside rubbing a cloth up and down the clouded glass. He didn't want to startle the cleaning lady, who wasn't looking out, her head turned down and covered in a furry black hoodie, so he knocked. She spooked anyway, stepping back. Sterling opened the door. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare," he said, and stopped as the person under the hood looked up at him. For a moment, they stared at each other. "Go," she mumbled, backing away. "Zell, what? It's you. What are you?" Sterling exclaimed. He reached out to touch the sleeve of her jacket. She jerked her arm away. And I forgot to say her nickname is Zell. "Let me by," she pleaded. "Hey, Zell, it's okay. You work here?" She nodded yes and then no, like the scared rabbit when they first met, but worse. She sprang from one foot to the other, frantic. "Zell, it's okay. You work at my old man's motel? I'm here same as you, working, or I'm supposed to be, helping thaw frozen pipes, but I left, so now I'll probably be in trouble with my dad. What the heck?" Sterling reached out again, and this time made contact with Zell's arm. She looked at his hand on her sleeve. "Please go," she said, so quiet he could hardly hear her. "Why?" Sterling asked. "It's cold as a witch's you know what, and I don't want to freeze," he said and grinned. Zell shook his hand from her arm. "It's not with me," she started and stopped. "What's not?" he began, but she hurried around him, nearly tumbling out the glass doors. He followed, calling her. She didn't turn back. He sprinted, trying to catch up along the sidewalk, but she got away like her life depended on it. Yards ahead, she turned a right angle and ducked into a corridor. Panting, he stopped then, knowing she lived here. Otherwise, she wouldn't have run like that.
Ugh. That still gets me.
It is a moment, when he realizes that this beautiful girl, this forbidden girl from the other side of what he calls the U, the rich kids at one end, the impoverished at the other, and a small middle population at his school. It's a moment for both of them, when he realizes.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I do have a question from Melissa St. Clair that I want to ask
Okay.
you. This is her
Okay.
question. Okay. The title made me think of the hit show Schitt's Creek and the setting of the Rosebud Motel. That's what I pictured when I read it. Did you have an actual motel on your storyboard for inspiration? And she also says, "Thank you for your many life lessons shared in the book as it being read by young adults."
Oh, thank you, Melissa. That is so kind. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, true confession, I don't watch much television. I watch Jeopardy every night. I'm such a nerd. I don't watch much television, so I had no idea. I had no idea. Okay, so there's a motel called the Rosebud Motel.
I didn't know it either.
I've heard of this show. But I had no idea. I was looking simply for a name that might have evoked romance at one time, but that also kind of had a bit of a connotation, or something of seediness, of something that had passed, of a time or an era that had passed. Now, here's the sort of, again, back to the subconscious. So I had a book event in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, early on in my book tour. And my brother lives in Myrtle Beach, which is close by. So I stayed with him, and we went out to dinner. And my brother said, well, okay, so I guess you got your name of the motel from Lancaster. That's our hometown, the Red Rose City. Lancaster is called the Red Rose City in South Carolina. And I said, what are you talking about, David? He said, don't you remember, Susie, the Red Rose Motel? It was up there by the Lancaster Steakhouse. I said, mm-mm. I got no memory no conscious memory whatsoever of a motel in my hometown called the Red Rose Motel. But according to my brother, there was one.
So
So I guess I got the name of the motel from my hometown, but I didn't consciously remember that there was one.
is this the only title that you ever had for the book? Did you ever play around with any other titles?
We did. Yes, I played around with other titles. I played around with trying to somehow put the teacher in the title. I played around with other things, but it was just something about the concreteness, of the Red Rose Motel that I thought was right.
Okay. And did you pick out this color? Because I think this
No,
is, you didn't? I
no.
think this is a gorgeous color, by the way.
I
I
do
mean,
too, and I like the cover, and it's really for my first novel. My publisher my editor sent me an email, and he said, "You can send us ideas for the cover if you want. We probably won't take them, but you can send them." So I sent ideas, and they actually took one of my ideas. So I thought this time it would happen again, and I had this image of a girl coming out of the motel with like a backpack on her shoulder and walking out into the world. Mm-mm. No, this was what they sent me. And at first I was like, whoa, what is this? But pretty soon I love it. I think it's bold, and I think it's intriguing, and I think they did exactly the right thing.
this is the kind of book, if you saw in a bookstore, for me, if I didn't know you, I would get it because of the color, the name, that it jumps out at you. I think.
I agree. I mean, I had nothing to do with the cover, so I'm just going to agree. I think it's a really good cover.
And so is this, did you say this is the only one they sent you, or did you have to pick, did they send you several?
This is the one they sent me. They said this is it. Now I did make the suggestion. I didn't feel like I don't know if you can see it online, but there's the key and the doorknob, and there's that old timey key fob that we always used to have at old motels by the side of the road. And it didn't seem like you could really see it well enough. So I did make the suggestion to contrast the color just a little bit more. And they did. And they did. And they put it was originally behind the brick wall, and they put it outside the brick wall, which I think made the key fob more visible.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, this may be a crazy question, but any follow up to them? Do you want to do a sequel?
I have had so many people ask me.
You have?
Yes, I've had so many people ask me about a sequel. They want to know where does Hazel go in her life from here?
Where does Hazel go, and where does Sterling go?
Yeah,
what happens to Angela?
Go? Yeah, they even want to know. I said, now wait a minute. We pretty much know what's happening with Angela. No, people want to know.
No, we want to know for real, like the real deal. And so
maybe,
what do you think about
I've
that?
just gotten so many comments on that. So maybe down the road somewhere.
Oh, okay. Well,
probably not next, but
somebody says sequel, pretty please. So they're I mean,
y'all are convincing me. The readers are convincing me.
Okay. Well, as we can just keep begging everybody to tell you, please, a sequel. We'll be all waiting, which will take me into the next question of what are you working on next? Do you have another book out soon? What are you working on?
Well, I haven't started actually writing anything. I am mulling the idea of fictionalizing this. I'm going to call her a young woman. She's 43 now. I think she was 41 when I met her. Life. I did a lot of interviews of her on Zoom. She's had quite both a catastrophic and an extraordinary life, a remarkable life to have come through it. Her mother how do I say it, forced her into marriage at age 15 in the 1990s to an abusive man who was 10 years her senior to get rid of her daughter, basically. And the life that Helen endured for the next 10 years was really, really grim. But she is, and I have become so fond of Helen, the real life person, and she has so much spirit and determination. But for a long time, she didn't think that she mattered and that she just pretty much gave in to her circumstances. But um, she had two children by this man, and if I can wrap my head around, I've started, I've tried to think about it because we've read a lot of these memoirs like The Glass Castle or Educated.
Mm-hmm.
We know how horrible, whatever, even Hazel for that matter, in fictionalized lives can be. But what I'm working on now is thinking about why would I want to write this story? I told Helen from the very beginning I would not write an as told to memoir, but if she was interested in my interviewing her and then maybe fictionalizing her life, meaning some of it would have happened and some of it would be complete fabrication. And she said she decided she would like that. So that's what I'm working on and thinking about. One of the things that amazes me about her story is she's forgiven her mother and even takes care of her mother. So I'm wrapping my head around the sort of the hugeness that can exist in the human spirit, the huge generosity that can exist.
She has actually forgiven her mother.
Not only has she forgiven her mother, who ran off to Nevada to become like a cook for Wheat Hands. That's what she left, when she married her off, that's what she went and did. She's not only forgiven her, she helps take care of her. It's just amazing to me.
I think you've caught me at a loss of words
I know.
because
I'm at a loss for, yeah. I mean,
I'm not usually at a loss for words at any time, but the enormity of forgiving someone for that is
it is.
almost
It is. It
unimaginable.
is. And I've talked to her a lot about it and will probably continue to talk about it and think about it.
But she must be one wonderful soul. I mean, she
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
share with the world.
Yeah. And she has gotten out of those circumstances and she's thrived and she owns her own business, a cleaning business, and she has employees and she has a wonderful functionable, nice husband.
And her children, are they okay
I
after all
think
that?
so. We haven't talked a lot about her children, but they live nearby her. I know that. They live near her.
There's so many heartache stories in this
Yeah. Oh
world,
gosh.
isn't it?
My world has been greatly opened up by Helen's story. I mean, I never heard of a rattlesnake rodeo until I met Helen.
As in real rattlesnakes?
Yeah. Yeah. All this takes place in Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
I know it's so we'll see. We'll see. That's the next book I'm thinking about. And then I'll think on a perhaps a sequel for Hazel and Company.
So how long did it take you to write the girl from the Red Rose Motel? How long were you
Um,
working on that?
the initial manuscript, like the manuscript for Bells for Eli, was about a year of me working, and I write at night, which is probably unfortunate, but maybe 4 or 5 nights out of the week. And I don't have a routine like a lot of writers do, where they say I'm going to write 2 hours a day or 1,000 words a day. My just don't work that. I can't work that way. I might start at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I might stop for supper. I might write 2 hours. I might write 7 hours. I've got this valve. I don't know how to describe it. It sounds kind of stupidly mysterious, and I don't mean for it to, but with me when I write, I start and I want to write. I mean, I'm driven to write. So I'm going to write as long as whatever's inside of me tells me to do it. But at some point, whether it's 2 hours or whether it's 7 hours, I just stop. The valve shuts off and I stop. I don't usually stop mid-sentence, but I might not be at the end of a paragraph. I certainly might not be at the end of a chapter. And then the next day I'll look at what I read and see what I think.
And go from there.
Yeah, that's the way I work.
Well, I love this book. I loved your first one too,
Thank
Bells
you,
for
friends.
Eli. I'm very that's a special book only because we did a book party and that was
Oh,
really fun. So
well,
we hopefully we can do
well,
another book party for this one
love
at
to.
some point
Love to. Well,
when
you are
you can.
such a terrific reader, and you are such a supporter for so many authors, and we all appreciate it very, very much. I mean, I know I speak for other authors whose books you've read and supported, and you're such a thoughtful, insightful reader, and we
Well,
appreciate
thank
it.
thank you so much. I always say that the reading and the authors, you all came out of the pandemic. I mean, that was the one thing that came out of the pandemic is getting to know so many authors on Zoom and
Yes,
participating and that kind of thing. So I just enjoy it. I love it. I love supporting authors and books. And I think authors are the kindest, sweetest, best people in the world. I mean, I
it
say
is
this
a
all the
good
time.
fraternity of people. It
It,
is.
it,
I've
it,
enjoyed that too, Francine. Meeting other authors, meeting readers and other authors is my favorite part of this whole business.
oh my gosh. And every time I say, meet somebody, I say, oh, that's the sweetest one. That's the sweetest one. They're all the sweet. And my friends still talk about you being here in Richmond.
Oh,
They
how
still ask about you and
oh,
talk
they was
about
well,
you.
just tell them I'm coming back.
Well, I've already told them that. I said, we don't have a date yet. As soon as I have a date, I will let you know.
Well, they are a wonderful group of women, and
Thank you.
how nice
I'm
to have such good
I'm
friends.
very lucky that I have a great community here because when I say book party, they show up. So I'm fortunate. But I have really enjoyed talking to you tonight. I'm so happy that Susie gave me this opportunity to speak with you about this book.
Oh,
We
thank you. I'm
appreciate your
glad to.
time. I hope everybody, if you haven't read this book, please go get it and read it. Anybody in Richmond, I'm happy to share, but I want my copy back. I'm not
Thank
giving it
you,
up.
and thank you, Susie McMahon, back there in the background for starting this wonderful virtual book club for writers and for readers and for folks who like to review.
Well, that's yes. Thank you, Susie. And I think we can all agree that we've enjoyed her book club. We hope it'll keep going, and we look forward to more fun times. And Susan, again, thank you for your time. When you can come to Richmond, you let me know.
I will. Thank you,
I'm
Francine.
happy to have you in my house and again and
That would be
gather all the
lovely.
people. Yeah, that would be
Lovely.
really great. So, and I wish you a very happy holiday season.
Same to
I
you.
hope you
Same
have
to
all
you.
your shopping done.
I wish I did, but I've started. I've started. I've got one more week of book events, and then I'm going to
Oh,
be home on the. I'm leaving on Wednesday. I'm going to be home on the 13th, and then I'm gonna dig in and get it done.
I'm going to try to finish mine this week. So I'm going to
Good.
get it all done and then kind of coast the rest of a few weeks.
Well, happy holidays to all of you out there, friends and readers in Cyberland, and we'll all get through this season together.
We certainly will. We wish everybody a happy holiday season and thank you for joining us. We appreciate it so much. Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, Francine. Good
Good
night.
night.